But right now, the way the law is written from the foundational piece of the Constitution and then built on it through these pieces of legislation, it would appear that there is a constitutional basis and a legal authority for doing what's been doing. Whether you love Trump or hate Trump or don't have any care, whether you love Obama, hate Obama, didn't have a care, all of these presidents have exercised the same authority. It's just at different times in different places.
Welcome to the Republic Podcast, where history meets scrutiny and facts matter. Join Rob and Lou as they dive deep into the foundations of American democracy, dissect the laws that shape our lives, and challenge the narratives behind today's headlines. From forgotten chapters in the U.S. history to the legal truths they didn't teach you in school. This is your front row seat to get informed, unapologetic conversation. We have an American republic, if we can keep it. Now, let's get started. All right, and we're back.
And we're back.
And we're back. And we're back. Hey, everyone. I'm Lou.
I'm Rob.
And tonight, we're actually going to do, after Rob and I discussed some things, we're actually doing what I think that we will call our special reports. Special reports. Not because we're special in reporting, but where the issue that we're talking about tonight, our intent is to talk about some current events and some of the things that came up recently, since this is now December of 2025. Some of the current events that came into play that we discussed, we want to talk about, has to deal with the presidential use of force and operations going on in the Caribbean regarding narco terrorism and things like that.
And we have in the, as we call it, in the can, we have done a number of, I don't know how many, it's a lot, episodes already. You guys have seen us talk about the Declaration of Independence, the reason why we're doing this, this particular venture. We're talking about just people don't understand the foundations of America. So we're talking about, in the first part of this podcast, those seminal and fundamental documents, among them Constitution of the United States. And in an episode to be aired after this, more likely, we already go through the founding of the Constitution, how it came about, Article 1 powers for the legislature, Congress, Article 2 powers for the executive. And we start talking about this stuff, but we always have said from this time, that we started this podcast, that if there are things that come up that implicate these things in such a way, we want to be able to hit these current events so people understand, because the gamut of talking heads talking about this particular action or these actions in the Caribbean, you would think that it's either the most sanctioned item that could have been, why are we even talking about it? Of course it's legal, to people saying that there's a war crime and, the president and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, should be brought to the Geneva, Court of International Justice. And it's such a spread. We want to be able to tell you out there, hey, we're the ones talking about these constitutional limits. Let me give you a little idea of what's going on in the background with that.
Right, exactly. And so that's why we're sort of jumping ahead, where a lot of the things that we'll be discussing, like Rob said, we'll be discussing fully in other episodes. We'll talk about Article 1 and all the war powers that Congress has in relation to their Article 1 authority. We'll talk about the president and all of his Article 2 powers for conducting war and other powers. And rather than waiting on that, or rather than recording this now and waiting until after you see those, we felt it was good just to do this right now. So you're like, okay, Lou, you've talked about this. Let's get into it. So let's get into it. So really, the issue, again, just to frame the issue here is that the United States, through under President Trump, has been taking what's been termed defensive actions to counter terrorism on what groups that have been identified as narco terrorists out of Venezuela. And there have been interdictions by the military, mainly the U.S. Navy, but also we were recently talking about the U.S. Coast Guard, interdicting these vessels on high waters and international waters, and basically using kinetic action, and that's a euphemism for destroying the ships and killing the people that are on there. Like, not in that step disabling and killing, but it's like all one kinetic action to eliminate what's called eliminate the force, eliminate the threat. And the question has come up, well, what type of authorities are there? There's been talks about how this is an unlawful war and that Congress hasn't declared war. So this is something that is a war crime. And you hear that thrown around so much, where war crime is just, that's why I felt that we need to jump in on this.
And Lou's right. You said, Rob, we got to jump in on this. And, I thought about it for a second. I'm like, you know what? Absolutely. Because by the time, if we were to wait through our regular rotation of content, this won't come up, probably till Memorial Day or something. But, yeah, just let's take a step back. And I know that you haven't had the benefit of the Lou and Rob education on the U.S. Constitution, but in a nutshell, the Constitution, it gives powers to make war, and it's shared by both the executive and the legislative in different ways. The commander-in-chief of the military, that's the executive, Article 2. The president is charged with directing the armed forces, right? But Congress, meanwhile, has the power to declare war and to raise and support armies. That's in Article 1. So there's a conflict, because like what we have now, we have people in Congress, for example, saying, you didn't consult us, we haven't declared war, we have the right to, raise and support armies and this and that. And so therefore you've overstepped your bounds. And there's some other legislation we'll get to in addition to this. But, Trump is saying, wait a minute, no. Under my authority in Article 2, I'm the commander in chief. And as Lou said, this is a defensive action. And therefore I'm here to defend, because my oath is to defend and support the Constitution. I'm here to defend and support this country as well.
Right. And and taking back, looking at it historically, as far as when Congress has actually declared war, the last time that Congress has ever actually declared war was World War II.
Right.
That was it. Everything else has been seen as some type of military military operation. The Korean War,
right,
the Vietnam War, the actions in Grenada, for those who remember them, the action, the global war on terrorism, all those actions. There was never actually a declaration of war.
Right. And it goes back to both Republican and Democrat presidents. And so help me God, I know this is not a political podcast, as we talk about.
Right.
And when Lou and I were off camera before, I said, the hypocrisy of both sides makes me ill, because as we've talked about, Truman, Democrat, he latches onto the fact that this is a UN peacekeeping operation, quote unquote, or a UN policing operation in Korea. Vietnam starts off with taking over from where the French were, and we're doing this under the guise of, and there are a bunch of different excuses that go on. Never consulted Congress to do anything. And the war went on for, at least the United States involvement, over a decade. We talk about Grenada in 1983. We talk about, and that was under Reagan, Republican. We have Bill Clinton with Kosovo and bombing, in 1999. We've talked about Obama with Libya, and it goes on and on.
Right.
So both sides, when they've been in the White House, have used this. And when they're not in the White House, we hear complaints about, you haven't, consulted Congress, and drives me bananas. Anyway, go ahead.
No. And absolutely. This is, and nothing that we say here is meant to have a political slant. We are just literally putting out this information there and framing it so that you can understand the legalistics of it better. So let's take a look at it. So as Rob said, Article 1, Section 8, Congress holds the primary authority to initiate and sustain military engagements.
Right.
And that goes in. Then you also have Clause 11, which is declaration of war. You have Clause 14, which is raising and supporting armies and navies. clause 15 calling forth the militia, and then the necessary and proper clause, which is sort of the catch-all provision.
Right.
Then the president has, under his Article 2 powers, he is, as named in Article 2, the commander-in-chief. And he has the authority over all the military, period, end of story.
Right.
That he directs them. That is his sole purpose. I mean, that is one of his sole authorities, is he's a commander-in-chief. What he says goes, period, end of story. But then there's another thing which is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we were that cheeky kind of podcast, I would put a clip in here there of Cartman going, "You will respect my authority."
Right, right. And maybe we will anyway.
All right, that's just,
But
continue.
The other thing that people are also overlooking is that also the president is the sole authority for dealing with other governments.
Right.
Congress has no play in that whatsoever. He is the sole person that works out treaties, that negotiates with other countries. There's actually legislative acts out there which prohibit Congress from getting involved with other leaders. Everything has to go through the executive. That's why they're called the executive authority. And the president is the head of the executive branch. So that's something that people are overlooking, and they're like, and I'll tie that back in later on.
Right.
But I'm sorry.
I was going to say, from that point, and in the time from the Constitution being enacted in the 1780s, we get up to 1823 with President Monroe issuing the Monroe Doctrine, saying in no short order, everyone out there in Europe and in the Eastern Hemisphere or whatever, in this hemisphere where we are, the United States, we're claiming dibs here. This is our turf. Keep your freaking hands off, or there's going to be some trouble.
Right.
And the Monroe Doctrine in the 19th century really carried some weight. And over time, just because of geography and the way things have gone in history, we haven't really raised it much since. It kind of comes up anecdotally with with Grenada in 1983, with the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1961. It was banned, but the Monroe Doctrine really kind of set the table for us, but really hasn't really been discussed a lot.
Right.
And then, well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I say, but people talk about the crisis I want to say crisis. The issue we're having now that we're talking about. They talk about, you hear some people talk about the Monroe Doctrine, then they talk about the War Powers Act from 1973.
Right where I was going to go. Yep.
In 1973, Congress pushed through legislation over the veto of President Richard Nixon, the War Powers Act, which in a nutshell, Lou will get more technical about it, but from my memory, it was, look, President, we look at ourselves in the Congress and we're not overplaying our cards here, but we're going to say, before you do anything and declare war or do anything like a war, you've got to get the blessing of Congress to declare war. And if you don't, and you start hostilities within 60 days, you've got to stop. And oh, by the way, when you start those hostilities, you have to notify us about those hostilities. I think it's within 48 hours or something like that.
Right.
And quite frankly, since 1973, both political parties have kind of disregarded it over time, as we've talked about.
Pretty much.
So, but now it's being raised again. It's actually legislation. It's on the books.
Right. But that's the thing. It's legislation on the books, but there's also been challenges, and it's something that people have talked about. Where is this constitutional?
Right.
It's a law that's looking to limit the authority that's inherently in the Article 2 powers of the president, and that there's been other cases which have challenged the president and his authority to take certain actions prior to the passing of the War Resolution Act, the War Powers Act, where you had cases like the one was a prize case where it was challenged President Lincoln back in 1863, where it sort of said what was, that they challenged his ability to do certain things regarding the railroads and other things like that. And that the court, I'm checking this because I want to make sure, I'm reading it from here, so I'm not misstating it, but that the court distinguished defensive responses to rebellions that are permissible under Article 2 from the offensive initiations of war requiring Article 1 actions, Article 1 authorization. So that's where they first started looking at it and started saying, here's what the differences are. But they found in favor of President Lincoln saying, yes, you have the authority to repel rebellions, put down rebellions, but also repel invasions. And that's something that becomes later on comes in. Then
Right.
one of the pivotal cases is the Youngstown case, which again in our Article 1 or our Article 2 discussion that we have, Rob goes into it fully to explain it because that's a very pivotal case. Without going into all of it, the one thing that the Youngstown case says is that basically the court looked at it as a 3-level type of review, where level 3 means that level 1 is when the government is operating fully in concert, that Congress has blessed the president's actions. And so that's when he's the strongest, and that it's very difficult to overturn what the president is doing.
Right.
The level 2 review is that Congress may not agree with it, but the president is sort of going on his own. They're not agreeing, they're not disagreeing, but the president is doing this. Then the third level, the lowest level, where it's like really more easy to overturn it, is when the president is acting in contravention of Congress.
Right.
And it's important because at this point, we're sort of in that, what you could say is a level 2, level 3 type of review. But
well, also just remember that the Youngstown case was specifically regarding executive orders that are written out. But go ahead.
No. So one of the, some of the key things and some of the things that we'll discuss a little bit more fully in a second is the one thing that differentiates it. And the one thing that really is I'm going to use it, but I hate, is the trump card here.
You went there, you did it.
Yep. I did. Is that what people are overlooking also is back when, after 9/11, Congress did actually pass another law, and it was sort of a codification of executive order, the authorization for use of military force.
Yep.
And the key thing for that is it said that, and basically some and substance of it is that if the U.S. government, they gave authorization for the U.S. government to take any actions necessary to combat terrorism, and that includes not just the terrorist groups, but any groups that are tied to any type of terrorist activity. So back then you were looking at Al-Qaeda and ISIS and these other groups that were over in the Middle East.
Right.
But as we'll talk about, that was also used to target other groups that were funding them. They were targeting groups inside Afghanistan that were growing the poppy fields that were used to fund ISIS and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And so they were authorized use to go in and destroy those fields. Even though there was no actual threat, that was money that was being used to fund these terrorist groups.
And for those of you who don't remember,
you should.
After 9/11, there was a sweeping move to push through this kind of legislation to grant extraordinary powers to the executive branch, the Patriot Acts and all that stuff. And this is just one of those things that came out of it where, we look at Article 1 and Article 2, which we should, because that's the foundation. What have been the legislative pieces that have been put into place since then, which will tell us today what's going on with these quote unquote narco terrorist boats. Is it authorized? Is it legal? The morality of it is not for, for me to say, Lou to say, anyone to say. We're just telling, we wanted to get on and convey to you guys, everyone who's out there listening and watching, and thank you very much for doing so. Hit like, subscribe.
Exactly. Got to get that plug in.
We do. But all of this is really about what's the legality? What are the foundational pieces here? And is this something that is constitutional or not?
Right. Exactly. We can debate, and Rob have the political efficacy of what's going on.
Mhm.
as far as, is this something that it's not can he, but is this something that he should be doing? And is this something that morally is it acceptable? And then politically, is it something that he should be doing?
Right.
Putting that aside and just looking at this solely from the legality of it and the constitutionality of it, my opinion, I'm not, well, my opinion after reviewing this and having been in these type of things, and I was telling Rob before we went in here,
Right.
I went back and pulled out my old law of war books when I was overseas and giving the use of force briefings and giving all these things. And actually, classes I took down at the at the Naval War College and the Naval Justice School and the National Defense University, all that kind of stuff. And this is all stuff that came into play. But the one key thing here is that authorization for use of military force has been challenged on a number of occasions in courts, and the courts have always said, well, yes, we're going to limit it in this certain way as far as military tribunals, and it had to deal with Gitmo and the establishment of the military tribunals and how it would operate and things like that. But as far as the actual operation and the use of military forces, the president has essentially plenary authority. And going back to the War Powers Resolution, the War Powers Act, that all it requires is that the president notify Congress and tells them what's going on. Congress then has the responsibility to act on their own. If they want to stop this, then they could remove funding from it. They could say, we don't agree with this. We're gonna move funding. But the one thing that the Supreme Court has reviewed on is said, well, yes, that's great, but that once money is allocated, the president could pull funds from other things and use it to support it. So really,
Right.
On that aspect, the War Powers Resolution doesn't really come into play here.
From my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Lou,
Yeah,
for all the things that you had to research when you were overseas, et cetera, the War Powers Act has been there since 1973, but it's kind of been kicked around like a piñata,
right,
and no one wants to really hit it. But when I think it was after Clinton went in to for the actions during Sarajevo and the
right,
Yugoslavia, what used to be Yugoslavia campaign.
right.
I think it was in the year 2000. The Supreme Court refused to hear a case about
Right,
whether the War Powers Act had been violated. They just punted. I don't know whether it's because it was moot or whatever, but there really hasn't been a full on all points challenge to the War Powers Act from 1973. So what you have is what Lou has described. The president, especially after 9/11, with those particular pieces of legislation granting the executive power almost carte blanche, all of the things we're seeing now appear to be within the scope of his authority.
right, right. And it all falls under the authorization for use of military forces. And some of the key things that came into that is that you had a declaration that these narco terrorist groups, Trendaya, Aragua, and some of the other forces, that they were designated as terrorist groups, not just by the president, but by the Secretary of State. And that's important because that, as Rob and I were discussing before we went online here today to record, one of the key things is that by being the head of our country and being the sole diplomat, that is another thing that the president has that sole authority. And we've seen it through, through a number of different presidents, from Bush to Obama to Trump, Biden, and then back to Trump. That's changed on a regular basis. You had the Muslim Brotherhood that was for a long time, then wasn't under Biden, and was back on now. And that's something that the president can do that however they want. And once it's designated, once that group is designated as a terrorist group
Yep.
by the president and by the Secretary of State, that's where the authorization for use of military force, AUMF, comes into play. And now it's basically gloves are off.
Right.
That under that, the president has that authority to take whatever action is necessary to defend the country against that terrorist force, as well as anybody that supports that terrorist force.
Right.
So, and that's again the AUMF has been challenged before, but the courts have basically said, look, this is something where, you want to change it, then rescind the AUMF,
Right.
change it completely, pull it out. And numerous presidents have had that opportunity. And this has been an ongoing discussion since, since it was passed. It wasn't something, I mean, there was a strong groundswell for it, just like there was with the Patriot Act. And the Patriot Act, along with the AUMF, have been discussed on numerous occasions at the end of the Obama, Obama era, and then during Trump one, and then Biden, especially during Biden, it was discussed, but it was never rescinded. So, given that, this is still a valid authorization for use of force. And what is going on over in the international waters in the Caribbean is all legal. And now some people are saying, well, it's against the Geneva Convention and it's against the UN Charter on the Law of the Sea, and it's against the other conventions that are out there. No, that if anything, the UN charters and the UN conventions that have come up after that, including the one United Nations Convention against illicit narcotics and psychotropic substances, where I wrote a law journal article on this years ago, back in the day. Yeah, I know, and so I had to pull that stuff out as well. That it actually supports action to basically interdict and stop narcotics trafficking on the high seas.
Right.
Because what you have is the ships, at least the information that's being provided, is that these are stateless ships. What does that mean? That means that they are not flying a flag. They're not chartered anywhere. So as such, that they are forfeiting any rights under international law, under national law, under anything. They're a stateless ship. So that means that under the UN Charter, you're encouraged to board them and to make sure that there's no illegal activity going on. This is happening in international waters. So unlike drawing a similarity, unlike where you have these actions that were taken, especially the similarities I'll draw is the drone strikes that were taken by the Obama administration overseas. Again, that you have it was under the authorization for use of military force.
Right.
And that it wasn't fully supported by Congress. So you fell into that level 2 type of status where, you could challenge it, but the courts would most likely say that because it was tied to this and they were declared terrorists and it's supporting terrorists, that this is valid. But the main difference is those strikes were actually occurring in foreign countries, in foreign airspace, on foreign territory.
That's a good point.
Huge, huge, huge difference. Where in international waters, there is it's international by declaration. So no one country can assert its authority over it. And so by the U.S. taking these actions, they're fully within their international rights. The other argument against it, the other argument that people put forward is, well, why can't we just stop them and board them and arrest them? Well, one, they're in international waters, so the U.S. has no authority to impose its own laws in international waters. Period. End of story. Can't do it. No matter what we think, we can't do that. So the only option we have is to turn them back over to Venezuela, who is actually getting money out of this, has been declared has already been recognized as supporting terrorist activities. So what? You're going to arrest them. You're going to stop the arrest them. You're going to turn everything back over to the country, and they're just going to ship it back out. So that's the trouble that you run into. I'm sorry. I'm just, as you can tell, this is something that's very near and dear to me because it's something that I live with for so long. That go ahead.
What I'll say, and give you a chance to get a drink. One of the things that's often overlooked, and it's not really talked about at all. Everyone will see ships in a port of call, and they have a flag that they're flying on the back stern. And, some people might wonder, well, why do we still need to do that? And it's something that's often overlooked, but as Lou said, it implicates so many things in international relations, international treaties, UN declarations, etc., that if you're flying the colors of a particular country, that entitles you to certain things. If you are not flying a flag and you are an independent rogue operator in international waters that is going to be deemed to be a threat of some sort, you have no or none of the safeguards as if you were operating a boat or some sort of vessel which was flying the flag of Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, whatever. It means something under international law. It has a very distinct meaning. So that's number one. Second thing that Lou said, that when we were going back and forth off air about all this stuff, and I got to tell you that there was certain times where we were going back and forth, and certain concerns were raised and certain things were said. And one of the things that I think is so compelling for everyone out there, and certainly for me too, not to say it wasn't compelling for Lou also, but he has a very different perspective because he's been deployed. He's been doing this, or had been doing this, for years, as he talked about with his experience. So his experience is very different from mine. And just as a layperson, some of the concern I have is because I don't have a big trust factor for the government of the United States. I don't care who's in the White House, just putting it out there. If the White House press secretary or the president or the someone authorized by the president goes to a microphone and says, "Don't worry, they're narco terrorists. They have all sorts of drugs on these boats. We know, don't worry about it." I do, in my own instinctual way, when the government tells me one thing, I think another, because I don't trust them. They haven't earned my trust for the balance of my life. So one of the things that was particularly, I suppose, helpful for this administration, I think it was last week, that a Coast Guard helicopter was chasing one of these narco terrorist boats. And instead of having a missile take it out, I think one of the gunners or a sniper on the helicopter took out the engines.
The hit runs, yeah.
And when they boarded the boat, lo and behold, they found, I think, 20,000 pounds of cocaine. That would be something which really hasn't gotten a lot of airtime, and I don't know why, because this shouldn't be a political issue. It should be an issue about, is it something that's constitutional? I don't care who's in the White House. I don't care who's in charge of Congress. I'm concerned, is this a constitutional action being taken by the country that I love? Is it something that is A, constitutional? B, does it fit when you actually put the facts together? And if those other boats were the same as this particular boat, and they found 20,000 pounds of cocaine on this one because they just disabled the engines and they were able to retrieve the contraband, that makes it a very, very different point of view and an argument, because up until that point, I think there had been 3 or 4 different boats that had been blown out of the water, and there had been some indignation expressed by senators and congresspersons from both sides of the aisle saying, well, how do you know that there's actually drugs on those boats? And I don't trust. I get it. But this last one really kind of was one of those, okay, we see it with our own eyes. Here's the contraband that was on that boat. And that certainly helps the administration and what they're trying to say. And that's great for a PR standpoint. But again, the purpose of this particular episode for Lou and Rob is to talk about the constitutionality of it.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and that's the whole thing, is where, one of the things, the whole, when they are picking out these boats, they're not just picking, I mean, the information that I have is that the information that when they're picking out these boats, it's not just willy-nilly. It's not like they're flying along all of a sudden, hey, there's a boat in international waters, let's go take a look at it. There's actually intel that they're building, just like they would for drone strikes overseas in the Middle East. They're building this information. They're gathering information. They're observing it, and they're watching it leave from port out into international waters. And so it's not like they're just picking boats at random and just blowing the shit out of them. They're specifically targeted because of the intel that they have that there's narcotics on it. And if you see the drones that, like, before they strike, you'll see the you'll see the video that they have. It's consistent with, I mean, everything that they have on there. You could pretty much see the packages that they have on top of there. It's not like there's, like, that there's these cabin cruisers that are, like, hidden and that you don't know what's on them, because that's an entirely different thing. There are these big open boats that have just bales of narcotics on it that are, that are being shipped. And so that's a significant difference. I mean, the one thing that, one of the issues, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to
No, one of the things we could talk about the individual cases, and I'm sorry to have
Right.
derailed it into the factual part of it, but I wanted to acknowledge the fact that people out there, like I was, were saying, whoa, 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 whoa. How do we even know what the government's saying is true? But even if we were assuming that it is true, we're going to have down below, and Lou has compiled all sorts of the legal ramification, the legal support, the legal doctrines, the propositions from the Constitution to case law to
UN charter,
exactly.
the law review articles on it, because I'm not that smart.
Come on now. So we want you guys to be able to have the information below to read it, to understand, okay, where does the authority come from? And when, Lou's talked about it, he presented to me, I looked at him like, you know what, I forgot about this, this, and this. But yeah, that ties it all together.
Right.
And, does it ultimately become an issue for the Supreme Court again, where someone says, hey, let's review the War Powers Act? That may be something that comes up. But right now, the way the law is written from the foundational piece of the Constitution and then built on it through these pieces of legislation, it would appear that there is a constitutional basis and a legal authority for doing what's been doing. Whether you love Trump or hate Trump or don't have any care, whether you love Obama, hate Obama, didn't have a care, all of these presidents have exercised the same authority. It's just in different times in different places.
Right. Right. I mean, and I agree. And not that I want to go down the rabbit hole of any specific case or specific situation, but there is one where a lot of people are complaining about, and rightfully so, about allegations of where there was a ship that was hit, a boat that was hit, and you had two people that were in the water, and that the claim is that they went back and they did a double tap. They went back, and, like, there was a kill order, like, to kill everyone and stuff like that. Well, one, that would never happen. Well, I shouldn't say it would never happen, because never and always are two factually wrong things, but it's highly unlikely. Here's the thing that everyone's like, oh, well, that's against the law of the sea, the law of war, the Geneva Convention, everything else. No, because you have to take a look, and then this is something that's very, 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 very fact specific, where people floating on driftwood inside the ocean after you've taken out their ship, and there's no way, there's nothing left of the ship. There's no way that and they're just afloat. Not only is it against the law in international law in any way to take those people out, but you now actually have an obligation to alert ships in the area that these people are in the water so that they can go and save them. But under the law of war and the law of the seas and law of combat and all the other international documents that have to do with this, that if there's any way, shape, or form that boat, that anything could be done, where they get back on there and they get back into what's called back in the fight.
Right.
The ship could be somewhat operational, where they could call the radio and the ship's still afloat, and they're going to try and save the narcotics and save any weapons or anything else that they have on the boat and transfer it over. By that main action of climbing back in the boat, if it's still considered afloat and there's anything that could be considered,
operation
contraband or something that would fall under the purview of why you hit it in the first place, it's still fair game. Whether you agree with that right or wrong, that's something where they're not considered out of the fight completely, and that you have the authorization under international rules to actually take them out, because it's you go in there to end the fight. And everyone's like, Lou, that's bullshit. No, it's not. I mean, I'll provide the links, and I'll provide all the references as far as what it is inside the description. Besides that, if you like this, and even if you don't like this, even if like Lou, you're wrong, still subscribe, like, and share for that. But I mean, this is something where there's a lot of discussion that you could have on it.
And
I'm not trying to say I'm right, I'm wrong, or anything else. It's food for thought. So when you go there and have these Christmas discussions, you could drop that truth bomb on people and watch shit happen.
I watched Lou and Rob, so
right.
But on the theme of the discussion, for everyone out there, thank you so much who have been watching and actually, posting comments for us. As we've always said, we'd love to have the interaction. We've been responding to people. We've been talking to people. This is one of those, and why we're doing this particular episode now and putting it in before we go on our merry way into the Constitution as we had planned. We wanted to pause because this is a current event. This is something that is right in the wheelhouse of what we're doing. And to say, is this something that's constitutional? Is it something that is reflective of our country and our founding principles and all the other stuff? And how does this play out in a constitutional context? We wanted to chime in and tell you, this is what we've done. We've done the research. Look below. If you still have concerns and you say, Rob, Lou, you're full of shit, or, actually, we want to tease this out a bit. What about this? What about that? Please comment. We'd love to have the discussion with you. And also, as we go forward, when there are things that come up that implicate the Constitution, that implicate the founding principles of this country, if there are things that implicate laws that we talk about, or certain foundational incidents, or certain foundational items of this country's history, whether it's the Gettysburg Address, whether it's the Treaty of Versailles, whether it's talking about the war powers given, or at least kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, just let Truman do what he's doing in Korea. Where'd that come from? How'd it go? All those things. If there are things that start to implicate those items from American history, we'll jump in with a quote unquote special report. And because this is in the news, and it has been for the last couple of weeks, and has been such a hot button topic, we wanted to jump in and give our 2 cents.
Right. And we appreciate you listening on us. Again, this is, absolutely true. Thing is that we can only do this if you're here and you like it. Please subscribe. This is the personal plug that we're going to be putting in, that we're getting there. We're getting noticed. We want to feed the algorithm. The only way we can feed the algorithm is by the subscribes. That we put out the links out there. We're on YouTube. We're on X. We're on Instagram. We also have our Spotify up now. So if you can't log into us here and actually watch us, you can listen to us on Spotify in the car.
That's right.
And like us, share us, drive the algorithm, because the more that you do that, the more you interact with us, the more you just click just to say, just get this off my screen. That's great.
I'd like to say, the more you want to say, hey, this is interesting, but okay, that's fine too.
Right. So anything to drive the numbers. But seriously, I truly appreciate it. I know that this has been a longer one than we've normally done, but it's something that really is, that it was, one, it's near and dear to me. It's important to both of us, because you need to understand the constitutional ramification, the constitutional grounding of what's going on. And whether or not you agree with us, this is just, again, food for thought, so that you can at least spur on your own investigations into what's going on, and form your own opinions. That's all it's about. So, and with that being said, thank you very much, everyone. Unless, Rob, am I missing something?
No, we're going to be rolling into the Constitution.
Right.
Unless there's something else that comes up this week that implicates other matters. But, as Lou said, this particular issue was near and dear, I don't use that term blithely, to Lou's heart, because what he has done on deployments has been similar to this. For me, it really hit home because we're talking about Article 1 powers, Article 2 powers. So between the two of us, it's like we need to jump on this.
It's like a crossfire hurricane.
Something like that.
And on that note, all right. Thank you all very much. To all you out there, cheers. Thank you for listening. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Brother, my brother.
Brother, my brother. Be good, be well.
Same here. Talk to you all later. Thank you very much. Hoorah.
Shut up and sit down.
Thanks for listening to The Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast. Join Rob and Lou in our next episode as we continue our riveting discussions on the most important topics affecting our great republic. Drop a line for topics you want to discuss, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.